Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation, we're talking with WRAL's 5 on Your Side reporter Keely Arthur about what happens when your vacation rental falls through at the last minute. Keely, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
So many of us use these home rental platforms like VRBO. They allow people to, spread out. They're usually less expensive than hotels. But when you're dealing with an individual homeowner, there can be problems. So Tracy Parks, the woman in your story, had a bad experience. First of all, tell us about the trip she had planned and how did she go about setting it up?
Okay, so Tracy Parks, she lives in Granville County, and she was reconnecting with girlfriends at the start of the 2023 year. They hadn't seen each other for 30 years, and I think one of them said, let's see each other before we die.
Wow, so a great reunion for her.
A great reunion, and they all kind of live in the southeast part of the country, but in different states. So they kind of thought, all right, Charlotte is a great meeting point. So they picked Charlotte. They found, I believe it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. Thought it was perfect. Booked it on VRBO, paid in full. The trip was supposed to happen at the end of January, and the Tracy Parks is a VRBO user. She's had a lot of experience with them.
And remind me what that stands for in case not everyone knows.
So Vacation Rental by Owner. And
that's correct.
It's changed. And the name hasn't changed, but it used to be like VRBO. Now it's VRBO. But yeah, it's kind of like an Airbnb for people who aren't familiar with it.
Sure. Okay. So she's communicating on this platform and she's on the app. She's communicating with the hosts, I'm imagining, but she says she's not hearing back. So she starts to get nervous because she's on her way. I mean, the trip is underway.
Yes. So again, she had years of great experiences, so wasn't too on edge about it until the day of the vacation came. She said that she did not get any instructions on how to get into the house, which you need, obviously. So she calls VRBO the day of the trip, and VRBO tells her the host doesn't have to tell you any details until an hour before you arrive. That's what she says they tell her. So she goes, okay. And so they get in the car anyway, and they drive over there. They arrive at the house, and there still is nothing from the host, and then no lockbox, no way to get into the home. So she calls VRBO again.
And usually there is some kind of a keyless entry, either a lockbox with a key or there is a keypad. And so this is unusual, and she's thinking, something's going on here. She's calling VRBO. What in the world are they telling her at this point?
Well, so she had messaged the host too a few times through the app, which is what VRBO, Airbnb, these things say.
That's what they require for privacy reasons,
exactly. Right? Keep it all in the app so that way they can kind of see what's going on. So she did what she was supposed to do. She called VRBO. VRBO, she said she talked to 4 different agents. They tried to reach out to the host. They said, we can't get a hold of the host. At this point, hours have passed the check-in time, and her friends are getting antsy. They want to start their nice trip. And she says to them, okay, we got to find a different place. VRBO and their cancellation policy, if something like this does happen, they'll either put you in another VRBO that's kind of a similar size, they'll put you in a hotel, or they say they'll reimburse you. She obviously needed a new space, so they said, okay, we'll get you a hotel. And I said, well, how big was the hotel going to be? 1 hotel room.
And how many women?
It was 3 women, but 3 bedrooms. They booked a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom
So very,
home.
Very different vibe
yeah,
to have that.
Exactly. And so she said, nope, can't do that. Don't want to waste any more time. My experience with VRBO this time around has been terrible. I'm going to go on the Airbnb app. They booked an Airbnb, boom, got in, and then had their nice trip.
Gotcha. Well, and the story doesn't end there. No. So we will be back after the break with more from Keely Arthur about what you should do in the event that something like this happens on a home rental platform. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL's 5 on Your Side reporter Keely Arthur about how to protect yourself when you have a problem with a rental home platform. So the situation with Tracy, it got pretty heated. tell us, first of all, how did the host respond? Because I know eventually he resurfaced.
So he did not resurface until we got involved, until WRAL 5 on Your Side, a television station, is calling him. So she called VRBO right after her trip, and VRBO said, well, we can't give you a refund. You're the one who canceled. Well, she's like, of course I canceled. There was no way to get into this house that I booked.
Right.
And so they were giving her the runaround, and she was so frustrated and kind of shocked that they were handling it this way, since it really was not her fault. So she contacted us. We got to work, started reaching out to VRBO, because we kind of saw it the way I think our listeners are seeing it right now, in that she did nothing wrong, and it was up to them to fix it. So we reached out to them, didn't hear too much back from them, but got a hold of the host. The host said, hey, I run 15 properties. I never heard from VRBO or Miss Parks until after the trip. He basically said he never received any messages from her and blamed the VRBO app. And then, to make things worse, after we talked to him, he left a bad review of Tracy Parks.
What did he say in the review? That she didn't show up? Or, I mean, what did he say?
I don't think he typed anything out. He just gave her 1 stars just across the board. So I think there's like 5 different options, communication.
Right.
Things
so
like
clearly that he was upset that he either thought she canceled at the last minute or didn't show up to begin with. So he gave her this 1 star. So tell me what happened next. I mean, did she get a refund, and what happened to that review?
So this is the advice that I want everyone to take away from this. She booked with a credit card, which is what you should do, because credit cards offer a lot of protections, especially travel type credit cards. She just had a generic kind of Capital One, but she disputed this charge from the $700 charge from VRBO, and Capital One refunded her the money right away. So that happened kind of quickly after the trip. She got me involved because she wanted VRBO to make things right ultimately. So the credit card, that money went back through, which was great, but we didn't hear from VRBO until about like 40 days after we emailed them over and over and over again.
And what did they say?
Finally, because I said, do you think this is fair? Now he's leaving her a review, and she couldn't leave him a review because she never stayed at his place. Right. They said, we're issuing her a refund in full. We're going to remove the bad review. Our refunds are triggered by the host. So it was always up to the host as to whether or not they were going to do the reimbursement. I don't know if they kind of just overruled that or if he ended up doing it, but VRBO gave her the refund after a long time and after she had to get a TV station involved.
But I mean, did they ever respond to any specific questions about what was happening on this app? Why wasn't he responding to them? Why didn't she get the check-in information?
No, and they did say they removed the listing. That was the one thing they said they did, but they never acknowledged if it was, a fraudulent thing. They never acknowledged how they were if they reprimanded the host. They were very, very vague, only gave her the refund.
So we really don't know what happened specifically. It sounds like maybe this person who had these properties, had a lot of properties, was not paying close attention to what was happening versus, we pretended that we had this property.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about Airbnb, VRBO type scams where people will list properties that don't really exist or aren't really available to rent. I don't know if this was that. In talking to the host, I didn't get that was the sense, and we certainly don't have any proof of that. But VRBO did remove the listing, which is some indication of a penalty to that host.
Correct. And then you also spoke with Katrina Brienza. Am I saying that correctly?
You are, yes.
And she handles guest services for Emerald Isle Realty. What was her take on this situation?
She just said, their Emerald Isle Realty, they run, I think, 600 short-term rentals on the North Carolina coast. And there's an office filled with people that handle all of these types of things. So she just said with Airbnb and VRBO, these things that are apps on your phone, you're just not going to get that human connection, that human understanding.
That personal service.
And certainly not a person who will show up and help you get into a home like Parks would have had she booked through a company like that.
Sure. And what about these apps and these rentals versus a hotel? I mean, I know a lot of people book hotels on Expedia and other apps. What are you hearing about that in terms of refunds and flexibility?
Read the fine print, get the travel insurance if you can. It's offered usually when you're booking on one of those travel websites or through the hotel. specifically. But hotels, you're not going to have the same amount of space as a home, but you're certainly going to be able to have a bit more flexibility. And a lot of times, if you have to cancel, you can always use the hotel at a later date. And a lot of these are huge hotel groups. So if you have a Holiday Inn that you booked in Wilmington, you can't go anymore because something happened, then you can use that credit
at another Holiday Inn.
Exactly.
Right. So it's kind of a toss-up. You have to decide what
matters most to you, but also know the policies going into it. Our kind of message to everyone, and I think Parks didn't get this, and she would admit this to you, everyone looks at the location of where they're going to stay, how many rooms there's going to be, how pretty it is. They do not look at who they're actually doing business with, so the host, and the cancellation policies of the host or the platform or the company. Do that as much as you're looking at how many bedrooms there are.
Thanks, Keely, for that great information. And I think it will be really helpful as people make spring break plans and summer vacation plans. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news events and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.